Summer 2026. Outside the Volkswagen headquarters in Wolfsburg, the red glow of union torches flickered against the office glass. Sirens wailed into the night. The workers were furious. But inside the boardroom, the conversation wasn't about humans. It was about the numbers. For decades, Volkswagen wasn't just a car maker. To Germany, it was an industrial pillar. To the working-class cities, it was a lifeline. And for over 100,000 families, it was a silent promise. The market might crash, profits might dip, but this empire wouldn't simply abandon its people. In 2026, that ancient promise stood on the brink of extinction. The executives were reviewing a plan to eliminate 100,000 jobs worldwide, nearly 15% of the group's total workforce. Simultaneously, for the first time in the company's 89-year history, the idea of permanently closing 4 major factories in Germany was on the table: Hanover, Zwickau, Emden, and Neckarsulm. This wasn't just a cost-cutting plan. It was an industrial giant admitting that years of wrong decisions had reached a point where it had to tear apart its own historical fabric. The question was, how did a brand that once symbolized German industrial order reach a point where, just to survive, it had to consider shutting down its factories, cutting 100,000 jobs, and even repurposing its production capacity? The answer doesn't start in the streets. It doesn't start in the market. It starts years ago, in quiet, glass-walled formal rooms, where executives thought they could buy the future with cash, haste, and a few strategic slides. And then, time ran out. Arno Antlitz, Volkswagen's CFO, warned with chilling tone. The company had only 1 to 2 years left to navigate this crisis. This wasn't just a management warning. It meant one of the world's largest automakers, with all its capital, branding, and factories, had entered survival mode. A major part of this collapse began with a very expensive delusion that Volkswagen could control the transition to the electric era with the scale, capital, and prestige of its past. The symbol of this delusion was the Zwickau factory. Management spent nearly 1.2 billion euros to convert this massive site into a dedicated hub for electric vehicle production. Alongside it, another project called Project Trinity, valued at nearly 2 billion euros, was defined. A project intended to represent the technological future of Volkswagen. On paper, everything looked magnificent. Zwickau was supposed to be the symbol of the empire's rebirth, a factory redesigned for a future that executives were certain would arrive rapidly. But there was a problem. Volkswagen hadn't just bet on electric technology. It had bet on the assumption that the market, the consumer, and the pace of change would move exactly according to the management's schedule. That didn't happen. Competition was fiercer than predicted. Demand didn't grow as promised, and the investments that were supposed to build an edge became a financial burden. A factory like Zwickau, meant to be the blueprint for the future, ended up on the front lines of the crisis. The same factory that cost billions to prepare, instead of being a sign of victory, became a symbol of calculation error. Volkswagen wanted to build the future ahead of schedule. But when the future doesn't arrive at that speed, what remains are expensive factories, half-dead projects, and heavy financial pressure. But the real crisis didn't start on the assembly lines. It started in the software. When the automotive industry entered the digital age, Volkswagen realized that new cars wouldn't win just with engines, bodies, or build quality. They needed operating systems, software experience, and digital synergy. Volkswagen's answer to this shift was Project CARIAD, the project that was supposed to be the software brain of the empire. The company invested over 14 billion euros into this division. Between 2022 and 2024 alone, CARIAD incurred over $7.5 billion in operating losses. About 6,000 engineers were hired, but the result wasn't a technological leap. It was a cost-heavy failure. The CARIAD software disaster was born right here. Volkswagen wanted to act like a tech company without being built like a tech company from the inside. The bureaucratic structure, layers of decision-making, and heavy processes choked the project from within. Reports stated that even a single manager had to hold 17 different meetings every week just to report status. In such an environment, innovation neither grows nor survives. The result of this managerial paralysis went straight into the product. The E3 platform software was so full of bugs that the group's strategic models, including the Porsche Macan EV and Audi Q6 e-tron, faced delays of over a year. The early versions that hit the market were met with customer dissatisfaction. In some cases, the delivered cars would suddenly shut down on the street or suffer severe malfunctions. This wasn't just a technical glitch. For a company with Volkswagen's history, it was a blow to its reputation. The German engineering giant, in an era where the car has become a software mechanical product, failed in its most important new arena. And the humiliation didn't end there. After 5 years of fruitless effort, Volkswagen was forced to pay $5.8 billion to the American firm Rivian to use its software and architecture. Meaning, a company that wanted to build its own digital independence was eventually forced to take shelter outside to compensate for its failure. This deal wasn't just a partnership, it was a public retreat, an admission that the project meant to be the heart of Volkswagen's future had become an expensive black hole. If CARIAD revealed the crisis, the Chinese market ruthlessly completed it. For years, China was one of Volkswagen's most important profit engines, but the same market that was once a major advantage gradually became the scene of Volkswagen's weakness. The ID series of cars was supposed to conquer the Chinese market. This product family was meant to be Volkswagen's answer to the new competition. But in reality, it faced Chinese automakers that were faster, cheaper, more agile, and software synchronized. Local rivals didn't just have lower prices, they understood what the local market wanted better. They updated products faster, and where Volkswagen was still entangled in its heavy internal structures, they moved with velocity. The pressure of this competition hit the numbers directly. Volkswagen's operating margin fell to 2.3%. For comparison, this figure was far lower than rivals like BMW at 5.2% and Mercedes-Benz at 4.8%. In the industrial world, such a gap is not just an accounting detail. It means the product isn't strong enough, pricing isn't effective enough, the cost structure has become too heavy, and the competitive advantage is eroding. This was the moment when the past could no longer save the future. Volkswagen was still massive, but mass, when accompanied by slowness and error, becomes a burden itself. Every great crisis has a moment where it shifts from rumor to reality. For Volkswagen, that moment was the leak of an internal document, the group target picture. This document showed that the discussion of adjustments, closures, and restructuring had been serious within the company long before it was publicly acknowledged. According to these same plans, executives had long been contemplating the closure of Hanover, Emden, and Zwickau, and in the general atmosphere of the crisis, the name Neckarsulm also appeared on the list of sensitive sites. For the workers, the blow wasn't just the plans themselves. The blow was realizing that perhaps their future had been decided long ago, without being spoken about with transparency. During this same period, another topic added to the rage. While the company was in crisis and the list of 100,000 job cuts was circulating in the media and internal spaces, the issue of managerial bonuses also surfaced. From the outside, the picture was very clear. At the bottom of the pyramid, workers who have to worry about their job security, their city, and their family. At the top of the pyramid, managers for whom the bonus mechanism hasn't stopped working. And this is precisely where the story of Volkswagen shifts from an industrial crisis to a moral one. Because here, it's no longer about a mistake in market forecasting or weakness in software development. The issue is whose mistakes are being paid for by whom. In this atmosphere, even ideas like spinning off the passenger car division were raised. From the perspective of critics, this wasn't just a structural maneuver. It was an attempt to bypass the Volkswagen Act, which gives unions and the state of Lower Saxony the power to influence factory closures. Meaning, the crisis wasn't just in the product and the market. The crisis had now entered the legal, political, and social layers. In the end, all lines of the story meet at a single point. Volkswagen wasn't just facing a failed project or a drop in sales. The company reached a point where its old social contract was falling apart. The 1994 pact had kept the illusion alive for years that even under pressure, the company had a red line. But in 2026, that line all but vanished. The unions reacted. IG Metall and the Works Council openly warned that if such plans went forward, they would do whatever they could to stop it. Daniela Cavallo stood at the forefront of this resistance. But the issue was that true power doesn't always speak in front of the cameras. Behind the scenes, the Porsche/Piech families and major shareholders, like Qatar, occupy a structure where their influence isn't necessarily accompanied by noise, but is felt completely in moments of crisis. In such a structure, those who steer the big decisions aren't necessarily the ones paying the direct cost. And this contradiction is the darkest part of the whole affair. On one side of the story, there are 100,000 jobs. That means 100,000 lives, 100,000 futures, 100,000 families. On the other side sits a structure that, after a 14 billion euro gamble on CARIAD, a 1.2 billion euro investment in Zwickau, a 2 billion euro project like Trinity, and a $5.8 billion retreat toward Rivian, still wants to maintain its balance. And then, the darkest whisper emerges. As the crisis intensified, reports surfaced of behind-the-scenes discussions about the possibility of repurposing part of the industrial capacity and moving toward defense production. Even if this scenario was only a consideration, the mere fact that it was raised says enough. Because when a company known for the idea of the people's car now thinks of completely different paths for survival, it means the crisis isn't just financial. The crisis has become identity-based. If the camera pulls back from Wolfsburg, you don't just see a company in crisis. You see Zwickau, a factory meant to be the future that has now become a symbol of doubt. You see Hanover and Emden, names that were once part of Germany's industrial stability and now appear in the text of closure plans. And in the center of it all, you see the truth, that Volkswagen's fall wasn't built by a sudden explosion, but by years of hubris, slowness, miscalculation, and running from reality. This isn't just the story of an automaker. It's the story of the day an industrial empire realized it couldn't enter the future with an old structure. And when no simple path remained, it decided to shift the cost downward. In the end, the greatest question remains: when a brand tied to the name of the people seeks its survival by eliminating those very people, Is there anything left of its original meaning? Or is Wolfsburg just the first sign of a world where every social contract is valid only as long as the profit margin remains high enough?